The WPCA sent a survey to homeowners in the Candlewood Peninsula area asking them if they want sewers. The survey is the latest step in their 6-year plan to add 1,100 new sewer customers, something they need to increase their revenue. In this video, we will go over the survey and provide information needed to make an informed decision. In part 1, we look at the survey in detail to determine whether it is fair or biased and what's the purpose of the survey, and we summarize certain key information that the WPCA did not disclose. In part 2, we provide a summary analysis and information to assist in answering the survey. In part 3, for those that have more time, we provide the details of how we calculated our figures. And in part 4, for those that are curious and have even more time, we cover the backstory. Who is the WPCA? How did we get here? And why is the WPCA so desperate to build sewers? Hint to preview, it has little to do with the lake or residents and more about the money that they stand to make from sewers. First, let's talk about why the WPCA is conducting the survey in the first place. What's the purpose? For those who are familiar with the history of this project, you will recall that in the September 2022 and November 2023 public meetings, there was overwhelming opposition to sewers. In fact, every single resident who spoke at those meetings was against sewers due to the prohibitive cost. And in the November 13th meeting, the WPCA chairman himself said that he could not recommend going forward with sewers because of the high cost to homeowners. Both of these meetings are on YouTube, and you can see the chairman's statement at the 1 hour 55-minute mark of the November 13th meeting. All comments of residents are at the end of the meetings. Given that residents already said that they did not want sewers twice, and the WPCA chairman also agreed with residents saying he would not recommend sewers, what then is the purpose of the survey? Why is the WPCA conducting it? They claim the survey is required by the DEEP grant, but that's not true. The DEEP requirement was that there be public input, which the WPCA got plenty of at the 2 meetings. The real reason for the survey is that even though they recommended against the sewer project at the November 13th meeting, the WPCA still wants to go forward, and 2 days later at their November 15th board meeting, they decided to continue with the project anyway. But there was a hitch. They could go forward only if they could show the public was in favor. Now, unfortunately for them, the public input at the 2 meetings was against sewers, but the WPCA chairman thought maybe a survey could give them different results. Now, why did he think this? Because, as he said, there may be homeowners who don't know much about the project and who could be convinced to vote in favor of sewers, irrespective of cost or need, etc. In other words, what he was saying and what he is banking on is that most homeowners won't have the time, energy, or inclination to look into the details and will just rely on what the WPCA tells them in the survey materials. And they could be right. In our experience, many homeowners who we speak to don't really know the details or background of the sewer project and are surprised when they find out. So the sole purpose of the survey is to reach as many people who don't have the information and background and then steer them to vote in favor of sewers in order to override the public input. Let's look at the survey. It doesn't take much to see that the choices to the key question are skewed to generate in favor responses. Here's why. First, instead of a simple yes or no to the question whether you want sewers or not, they list 5 possible answers. And of the 5, 4, including the last one, unsure, will be deemed by them as being in favor. In other words, they give people 4 different possible ways to say that they are in favor and only 1 way to say they're not in favor. In contrast, the Candlewood Shores Board conducted a survey in September 2023. Residents were referred to all of the WPCA materials as well as the videos produced by the Candlewood Shores Sewer Committee. They were then asked to vote based on all of the information. Here's a copy of the only question with only 2 possible answers, a simple yes or no. No bias, no skewing, no tricks. Over 60% of the 510 homes participated, and 93% voted against sewers. Next, let's look at the choices for possible answers. The first choice asks you to assume that sewers are essentially free, and if so, would you theoretically be in favor of sewers? If ever there was a way to rig a survey question to get votes in favor of sewers, this is it. The WPCA knows that not only is this impossible, it is totally irrelevant, unless, of course, your objective is just to get a yes response. Imagine someone asking if you would be theoretically in favor of jumping off a 10-story building, assuming you won't get injured. You'd think it was a trick question trying to get you to say yes, that you would be in favor. Well, that's exactly what the WPCA is trying to do. Anyone reading this choice who is not aware of the WPCA's purpose could reasonably say, yes, sure, why not? If the sewers were free, I'd be in favor. Even if we go along and indulge the fantasy of a project with no or nominal cost, for example, if the government were to fund 100% of the project, sewers will still not be free. What the WPCA doesn't tell you, but what is clear in the fine print of their engineer's report, is that in addition to the cost of sewers, every homeowner will have to pay upfront and ongoing cost. As we explain later on, this includes the cost to hook up sewers and to install the grinder pump. Also, most or all homeowners will opt to get a backup power generator for their pump. That is, if they want their toilets to work during power outage. And the pumps will need to be replaced every 8 to 10 years. As shown below, these costs will run approximately $30,000 upfront and thousands in the future. So, even with nominal or no project costs, there still is no such thing as free sewers. The second choice asks if you would be in favor of sewers if the cost was no more than the cost of septics. Well, as we demonstrate in detail below, and as the WPCA is aware of, the cost of sewers is in fact not only more than the cost of septics, it is significantly more. Sewers will cost a minimum of $85,000 to $110,000 compared to septics costing between $6,000 and $30,000. But by asking this as a hypothetical question that omits key information, the average resident who may not have the relevant information might be inclined to say, again, sure, if the cost is the same, why not? Again, this is another clever way to get someone to say yes. If they don't get someone to say yes with the first two hypotheticals, they then give you a third choice. Would you be in favor of sewers based on their estimate of $50,000 per average home? This is a more legitimate question, but it intentionally omits key information. The WPCA knows that the $50,000 estimate does not include all costs that residents will have to pay. Here's what they don't tell you. Their own engineers in their reports say that the WPCA does not have the capacity to handle the waste flow from the proposed sewers, and they would need to build a new sewage treatment plant estimated at $50 million plus, which will also have to be added to the cost of sewers. And here's another key fact they don't mention. The sewer system they are proposing is not a standard gravity-fed sewer system that has no maintenance cost. Rather, the $50,000 estimate is for a grinder pump sewer system. Now, although a grinder pump system has the cheapest project cost, as we explain in parts 2 and 3, it is also the worst and the most inconvenient system for homeowners. And the $50,000 estimate does not include the high upfront costs and high ongoing operating and maintenance costs that homeowners will have to pay for such a system, which, as we just saw, can run up to $30,000 upfront and thousands in the future for things like replacement of grinder pumps every 8 to 10 years at a cost of $8,000. When you add it all up, the real total cost to homeowners isn't even close to $50,000. It will be a minimum of $85,000 to $110,000 for an average home, and higher for homes with tax values greater than $276,000. So, is the survey fair? Well, the first choice of theoretically free sewers is misleading and disingenuous at best, as it is impossible. It's there only to get a quick in favor response from residents who are not aware of the WPCA's motives and purpose. And the second and third choices omit critical facts. The WPCA needs a sewage treatment plant to handle the waste flow, and residents will have to pay for it. And the $50,000 estimate does not mention that it's for a grinder pump system that requires at least $20,000 upfront costs as well as high ongoing expenses. For these reasons, our conclusion is that the survey is not fair. It is skewed and intentionally misleading, intended to get unsuspecting residents to vote in favor of sewers. Each homeowner should review all available information and then make whatever decision they think appropriate and respond to the survey. The survey asks a number of unnecessary questions, such as, what is the age of your septic system? But the only question that matters is, do we want sewers or not? As to that question, the Candlewood Shore Sewer Committee's view is that, as explained in the rest of this video, because the cost of sewers is prohibitive, much greater than the cost of septics, and because there is no environmental need for sewers, we believe the sewer project should be stopped. And the only way to do that is to respond not in favor. In part 2, we go over how to analyze and make an informed decision on sewers. In the survey, the WPCA made no claims that sewers are needed to save Candlewood Lake, and we commend them for stopping making such false claims. In the analysis of whether we want sewers or not, we first should consider whether sewers are needed, so we briefly do touch on these claims. The WPCA originally claimed that sewers were needed to prevent pollution of Candlewood Lake. In an April 2023 study, it was conclusively shown that septics were not polluting or harming the lake. For more details, please see the video on YouTube. Then in September and November 2023, the WPCA's experts acknowledged the findings of that study, and they said the lake was in fact in decent condition and there was no environmental need for sewers. So now that we know sewers are not actually needed, whether or not we should vote for sewers depends on two things. Will sewers improve or make our lives more convenient? And if so, how much would we have to pay for that? Will sewers make our lives more convenient? Well, that depends on the type of sewer system. A standard gravity-fed system, which is what is typically built by all municipalities, utilizes gravity to channel the waste flow directly into the system. There are no holding tanks, no pumps, no maintenance, and no additional costs. From a homeowner's perspective, it is the best system and would in fact make our lives more convenient. However, it also has the highest upfront cost, $95 million plus. So the WPCA says this is not a feasible system. Then there is a low pressure system. The waste does not go directly into the sewer system. First, it goes into a holding tank that the homeowner has to install and maintain. Then several times a day, a grinder pump grinds and pumps the waste into the system. The pump requires electricity to run and requires regular maintenance. In other municipalities, there have been hybrid systems where grinder pumps have been used in special cases where elevation or terrain is an issue. But we are unaware of any municipality that has built an entire sewer system where every single home has a grinder pump. Although this system has the cheapest upfront cost, it's only a question of whether you pay now or pay later, as the ongoing operating and replacement costs are much higher. Most people would not consider this more convenient or an improvement over septics, but with the cheapest upfront cost, $60 million, this or hybrid variation of this is what the WPCA is proposing and hoping residents will approve. So this is a system that we will analyze. So what are the pros and cons of a grinder pump sewer system? First, the pros. One shouldn't have to worry about overloading the septic tank. There's no worries about, for example, long showers, running the washer and dishwasher all at the same time. Two, for those that want to add bedrooms and bathrooms to their house, they won't have to worry about whether their septic system can support that. And three, for those that have an empty lot or a double lot they may want to sell, it should be easier to sell to a developer as they would have more options to build. The cons. Homeowners will be trading maintaining a septic tank for maintaining a small holding tank and a grinder pump. This will require regular maintenance and repairs to keep the pump from clogging. The pumps have a useful life of 8 to 10 years, so that will require the homeowner to replace them at some point. And if you want to be able to use toilets or water during a power outage, which all of us seem to experience just about every year, it requires a backup power generator. In addition, sewers will allow unrestricted development, including along the lakefront. For example, the Poets Landing condos on the lake in Danbury were made possible only because there were sewers. For some homeowners, the cons of a grinder pump system will outweigh the pros. That is, they may think that maintaining a tank and grinder pump is no better or even worse than maintaining a septic system. So for them, they may want to stop here and vote no. Other homeowners may see some net benefit. That is, for them, the pros may outweigh the cons. And for them, the question then becomes, how much will it cost for sewers? It's a classic cost-benefit analysis. As shown on the chart, some people would pay zero if they have no improvement in their lives, while others, as they see increasing improvements, would be willing to pay more for the sewers. So for those people that are interested in the cost of a grinder pump system, we calculated that cost, first on a total project basis, and then we broke it down to a monthly payment. We start with the WPCA's estimate of $60 million. We adjusted by adding $18.5 million for things such as street paving, financing costs, system modification, etc. Here, we just have the total, but all of these are broken down and gone over in detail in Part 2. That brings the total to sewers to $78.5 million. We then added amounts that would be needed to get the additional capacity to handle the sewers. As the engineers clearly stated in their report, the WPCA does not have the capacity to handle the flow and must either build a sewage treatment plant or they can try to find out if Danbury has additional capacity. If you're interested in this capacity issue, there's more detail in parts 2 and 3. In any event, the cost of a new plant, according to the WPCA, would be $42 million plus. If they were able to get more capacity from Danbury, we estimated they would pay $5 million. That brings the total in the second column to $83.5 million in the case where Danbury can provide the capacity and $120.5 million in the case where the new plant is built. In the third column, on an individual basis, the sewer tax amounts for an average homeowner would be $55,000 if Danbury is used or $80,000 if a new plant is built. The sewer tax amounts will be a lien on a home, like a mortgage, and just as with any mortgage, if monthly payments are not made, the WPCA has the right to foreclose on the home. In the fourth column are the sewer tax amounts if a 20% grant is obtained, $44,000 and $63,000. Of course, these amounts would increase if a home's tax value is higher than $276,000. Next, we compared what the monthly payments would be for a grinder pump system and a septic system. In the left two columns, we calculated the cost of a grinder pump system. First, in the first column using Danbury, and in the second, assuming a plant had to be built. You'll notice that there is $30,000 in upfront costs, even before the sewer tax. This has to be paid by every homeowner, no matter what their tax value is. Every homeowner will have to pay to hook up to sewers, to install the tank and grinder pump, and to install a backup generator. They don't actually have to install a generator, but we think most people will want to know what it will cost if they choose to do so. If you add the sewer tax of $55,000 or $80,000 as we just calculated, the total comes to $85,000 and $110,000 per homeowner. The monthly payments come to $780 and $950 per month. For details on how all of these figures in this chart were calculated, again, please see Part 2. If a 20% grant is obtained, those amounts would be reduced to $700 and $840 per month. We then looked at the cost of septics. We took three situations. First, homeowners whose septics have no problem. Second, homeowners who may need to replace their leaching fields. And third, homeowners who may have to replace their entire system, tank and leaching fields. We contacted several companies for estimates. For a new system, the range was from $15,000 for a simple installation up to $35,000 for a complex and more difficult installation. We used the midpoint, $25,000. We assumed that homeowners that need a leaching field or whole new system would finance with a home equity loan. That brings the total monthly payments to $10 per month for homeowners who have a functioning system, or $190 per month for those who have to put in a whole new system. A homeowner who may have a very difficult installation that costs $35,000, their monthly payment would be $260. No matter how you look at it, Septics are a fraction of the cost of sewers, even if a homeowner has to replace an entire new system. This is why the EPA has said that septics are cost-effective and provide economic benefits. Please note that all figures that have been used in this presentation have been taken directly from the WPCA's reports or based on estimates from local vendors and professionals. To summarize Part 2, it has been conclusively established that sewers are not needed. 2, will they improve or make our lives more convenient? Well, each homeowner should weigh the pros and cons for themselves, but if the cons outweigh the pros, then they should vote not in favor. If the pros outweigh the cons, they should consider then how much would they be willing to pay. If a home's tax value is $276,000 plus, are they willing to pay $780 to $950 per month or $700 to $840 with a grant? If not, they should vote not in favor. If they are, then they should vote in favor. In Part 3, we'll go over the details of all of our calculations. Our analysis will start with the WPCA's estimates for the most expensive and the cheapest sewer systems, the standard gravity-fed system and the low-pressure system. We then adjust those figures for project items that were not included, and we also adjusted for the cost of getting additional capacity, which the engineer said will be needed. Lastly, we calculated and compared what the monthly payments would be for sewers and septics. The WPCA estimate for a standard gravity system is $95 million plus and $60 million for a grinder pump system. There are hybrid systems where some homes get grinder pumps and some don't. We did not look at all combinations as the cost of all hybrid systems are more than the grinder pump system, so homeowners could assume the cost of the grinder pump system is the floor or the lowest, and that all other systems will cost more. You may wonder why there's a difference in cost. Several reasons. The gravity system requires the WPCA to build and maintain 7 pump stations, whereas only 1 pump station would be required for the grinder pump system. Essentially, by requiring every home to have a grinder pump, the cost is shifted to individual homeowners. You can see the relationship. 7 pump stations and only 30 grinder pumps versus 1 pump station and 1,100 grinder pumps. Also, with the gravity system, the drilling depth required for pipes in the gravity system can be as deep as 35 feet, which is very expensive compared to less than 10 feet for the grinder pump system. Although, from a homeowner's perspective, the gravity system is the best, due to all these factors, that system would cost the WPCA much more upfront to build, whereas the grinder pump system, although the worst for all homeowners, does cost the WPCA less upfront to build. We then adjusted the estimates for certain items. First, we adjusted $14 million for street paving. This amount is based on estimates contained in the WPCA engineer's report and estimates received by Candlewood Shores. The amount that WPCA included in their estimates was only to patch the trenches 4 to 8 feet wide, whereas the roads are 25 feet wide, and anyone who has seen what the patchwork looks like knows that roads need to be repaved, not patched. Construction financing is the cost incurred by the WPCA to finance the 4 to 5 years of construction. The actual amount will vary depending on how they will finance and whether they will make residents start paying the sewer tax before sewers are completed. Construction projects usually include a 3 to 5% interest reserve. We used only 2%. The cost to modify the WPCA current pipeline is estimated at a minimum of $2 million. For example, the engineer said that the main pipeline on Candlewood Road would need to be replaced with a bigger pipe to handle the increased flow. Lastly, we added 5% contingency. The WPCA estimate includes a contingency, but only of 10%, whereas industry standard is that estimates are plus or minus 20%. After all adjustments, the total comes to $117 million for the gravity system and $78,500 million for the grinder pump system. The WPCA has said that the gravity system at $117 million is too expensive and not buildable, so it is proposing the $78.5 million grinder pump system, which is the cheapest. There are hybrid systems in between these two, but they are all more expensive than the grinder pump system. Consequently, we will focus on the grinder pump system as this is the minimum homeowners can expect to pay. All other systems will cost more. Why did we make the adjustments? Well, first, let's take a look at the WPCA's track record. In 2020, they said sewers would cost $18.25 million. We challenged that, and now the WPCA's own engineers acknowledged that that estimate was totally unrealistic. In 2021-22, the WPCA tried to convince homeowners that sewers were needed because septics were polluting the lake. We challenged that also, and now those claims are acknowledged to have been false and misleading. That's 0 for 2. Now the WPCA is giving us new estimates. What happens if they go 0 for 3 on these and those estimates are also too low? The WPCA's incentive is to keep the estimates as low as possible in order to get homeowners to approve. As CDM Smith, the engineers, said on November 13th, these are just estimates. There are no guarantees. And who bears the risk if the estimates are wrong? In other words, who would have to pay the excess? The WPCA board members, WPCA, the town, the engineering firm that came up with the numbers? No, the homeowners would have to pay. As is stated clearly on the WPCA's website and confirmed by the engineers, homeowners are legally obligated to pay all costs, no matter how much they may exceed the estimates. The amount of money at stake here is too significant for homeowners to take a chance that the WPCA is wrong again. Consequently, homeowners should adjust to include all relevant costs, not just what the WPCA decides to include, so that we can get as realistic an idea of what this will cost as is possible. And so that is why we made the adjustments. In addition to the adjustments for items not in the estimates, there is one other major cost that the WPCA has avoided disclosing to homeowners. That is the cost to obtain the capacity that is needed to handle the flow from the sewers. As mentioned in Part 1, the WPCA has a capacity problem. Currently, all waste goes to Danbury's plant, but the engineers were clear in their report. The capacity that Danbury currently gives to the WPCA is not nearly enough to handle the waste flow from the proposed sewers. The WPCA would require capacity of 1 million gallons per day. They currently have only 380,000 and have a plan to get 200,000 more. That still leaves them with a shortage. They need an additional 420,000 gallons of capacity. They would have to do something, and in September 2023, the engineers said that something was to build a new sewage treatment plant. But for some unexplained reason, at the public meeting on November 13th, they did not discuss the new plant. Instead, at the November meeting, they came up with a last-minute idea. First, homeowners should approve the sewers. Then afterwards, we could ask Danbury if they have additional capacity. The logic of this approach confounded us. We could not fathom why the engineers, who spent over 1 year on this study looking at every possible option and compiling a several hundred-page report, did not think of asking Danbury a very simple but absolutely critical question. Do they or do they not have excess capacity? And how much will it cost? We find it incredibly irresponsible, even disingenuous, for the WPCA to ask homeowners in a survey whether they want sewers without giving them any idea of how the additional capacity would be obtained and at what cost. Instead, the WPCA wants homeowners to approve sewers and just leave it to the WPCA to figure out the capacity issues later and then pass the bill on to them. We don't know why the WPCA is doing this, but we suspect the reason they have not asked Danbury is because they may already know the answer. Danbury may not have additional capacity, so the only option would be to build a new plant. And that, as you will see later on, would be so expensive that no homeowner would even consider sewers. So the WPCA has instead chosen to avoid discussing this issue at all in the hope homeowners will not notice. However, since homeowners will have to pay the additional capacity one way or another, we could not ignore this issue. We calculated what the additional capacity cost would be. We gave the WPCA the benefit of the doubt. We assumed that Danbury would have capacity, and we calculated the cost of both options. In the middle column is the cost of getting capacity from a new treatment plant, $42 million, and in the third column, the cost from Danbury, $5 million. According to the engineer's report, the new treatment plant would cost $40 million, plus the cost of acquiring the land and the cost to modify the existing pipelines. The cost of getting capacity from Danbury is estimated at $5 million, based on their current deal with Danbury for 200,000 gallons. That would bring the total to 120,500,000 if a new treatment plant is built and 83,500,000 if Danbury is used. Based on those costs, how much will the sewer tax be per homeowner? In the case where Danbury is used for capacity, the 83,500,000 translates into a sewer tax amount of 55,000 for an average homeowner. And if a new treatment plant is built, the sewer tax would be 80,000. In the third column, if a 20% grant is obtained, those figures are reduced to 44,000 and 63,000. The sewer tax amounts are calculated as follows. First, we calculated the sewer tax rate. We take the total cost and divide that by the tax value of all 1,100 homes, which, according to the engineer's report, is 420 million. Doing that for the Danbury option, we take 83.5 million divided by 420 million, and we get a 20% sewer tax rate. Next, take the sewer tax rate and multiply it by the tax value of a home, and that gives us the sewer tax amount. So, for example, taking the 20% sewer tax for the Danbury option and multiplying it by 276,000 gives us the $55,000 tax amount. We chose 276,000 as the average home tax value because that is what the WPCA chose in its earlier estimate. The sewer tax rates for the other options are 29% or $80,000 if a new plant is built. And if a grant is obtained, the sewer tax rates would be 16% and 23%. You see, we have calculated 4 possible sewer tax rates to take into account different scenarios. If you would like to calculate your sewer tax amount, you can do so by going to the link indicated, finding your home's assessed value, and then choosing whatever rate and scenario you think is more likely. We calculated and compared the monthly payments for a grinder pump system and a septic system. In the 2 left columns, we calculated the cost of a grinder pump system, first using the Danbury option, and second, if a plant was built. Every homeowner would have $30,000 in upfront costs, even before the sewer tax. This amount has to be paid by every homeowner, no matter what their tax value is. Every homeowner would have to pay to hook up sewers, to install the tank and grinder pump, and to install a backup generator. As we said, you don't have to install a backup generator, but we think many, if not most people will, and they may want to know what it will cost if they do so. Add the sewer tax of 55,000 or 80,000 as we just calculated, and the total comes to 85,000 or 110,000 per home. On a monthly basis, we assume the 30,000 upfront cost would be financed by homeowners with a home equity loan at 6% over 20 years. That comes to $215 per month. The sewer tax of 55,000 or 80,000 would come to $380 and $550 per month, payable over 20 years at a 5.5% rate, which is a single-A municipal bond yield in October, which we believe would be comparable to what the WPCA sewer bond would be financed at. We estimated $50 per month for electricity and $85 per month for the replacement of the grinder pump, which would have to be replaced at a cost of $8,000 at today's cost every 9 years, which is the average useful life. That brings the total monthly payment to $780 for the Danbury option and $950 for the new plant option. We then looked at the cost of septics. We took 3 situations. First, homeowners whose septics have no problem, and second, homeowners who may need to replace their leaching fields, and third, homeowners who have to replace their whole system, tank and leaching fields. As we mentioned in part 1, we contacted several companies for estimates, and we got a range of 5,000 to 8,000 for leaching fields. We used 6, and for a new system, the range was 15,000 to 35,000 for a more complex and difficult installation, and we used the midpoint, 25,000. Homeowners could pay these amounts up front, but for comparison purposes, we assumed homeowners that need a leaching field or a whole new system would finance with a home equity loan at 6% on a 20-year term. The monthly payment for that loan would be $45 and $180. The only other cost for septics would be due to pump outs, which should be done every 3 to 5 years, depending on use. We assume every 3 years, and at an average cost of $300 every 3 years, That comes to $8, which we rounded to $10, bringing the total monthly payments for septics to $10 for a homeowner with a functioning system and $55 or $190 for a homeowner who has to put in a whole new system. Again, for a homeowner who may have a difficult installation that costs $35,000, their monthly amount would be $260. As you see, septics are a fraction of the cost of sewers, which is why the EPA septics are economical and good for the environment. Part 4, the backstory. There is more than meets the eye behind the WPCA's push for sewers. In fact, we believe there are certain financial and economic interests and certain parties that have nothing to do with the lake or peninsula residents that are the real drivers behind the WPCA's push for sewers. To understand this, in Part 4, we need to explain who the WPCA is, why building sewers in the peninsula is so important to their business, and how using the health of Candlewood Lake as a pretext for sewers will help them or can help them get government grants. The WPCA is a self-funded sewer business. What this means is that it gets no money from the town. All of its income has to come from sewer customers. Once you become a sewer customer, you are obligated by law via their quarterly sewer charge to pay all of the WPCA's expenses. Currently, the WPCA has only 1,200 residential and 670 commercial customers. The sewer system, which they oversee, is over 50 years old, and understandably, their expenses and capital expenditures to repair and maintain the system are increasing. In order to pay for all these expenses, the WPCA needs new customers to provide additional revenue. The lack of new customers, according to their annual report, puts a strain on their budget. And the WPCA is run by 5 part-time people who are appointed by the first selectman after first being nominated by the Republican or Democratic committees. They are not elected, and they are not accountable to the community, and they are not overseen or accountable to any other town agency or official. Pending real estate projects, including low-income multifamily housing units, would give the WPCA its needed new customers and increase its revenues. But there is a problem. As we mentioned, they cannot hook up any new customers because they do not have the capacity to handle additional waste flow. In fact, in 2021, the WPCA had to issue a moratorium on new sewer hookups, and this has prevented the building of new commercial and residential projects in the Four Corners area as well as parts of the lakefront. In 2021, after meeting and having a constructive dialogue with area developers, the WPCA came up with a 2-pronged plan to accommodate further development. They would study adding additional new sewer customers from Candlewood Peninsula, together with getting additional capacity via a new sewage treatment plant. Why does the WPCA need this 2-pronged plan? Well, consider 2 facts. 1, a new sewage treatment plant would cost $50 million plus. Remember, Danbury had to pay over $100 million just to upgrade their plant. And 2, the WPCA's current customer base is too small to pay for such a plant. But if the WPCA can convince 1,100 Peninsula residents to approve sewers, then it can justify the new plant and spread the cost over a larger customer base. To summarize, the WPCA needs new sewer customers to support its budget needs for its 50-year-old system. But the WPCA cannot add new customers because it does not have the capacity to handle the waste flow. And a new sewage treatment plant would solve the capacity problem. The 2-pronged plan to add 1,100 new Peninsula sewer customers would help the WPCA both increase its revenues and help it justify and pay for the new plant. The question that comes to our minds is the WPCA using the Peninsula residents to help it get the plant it needs for further development? Well, if so, the WPCA should be transparent and disclose the total cost of sewers and the new plant to all residents. Remember we said earlier how we could not understand why the WPCA won't say anything about its plans and costs for getting additional capacity? Well, one reason is the WPCA needs residents to vote in favor of sewers, and the cost of sewers, together with the plant, is very high, $120 million plus. And if that was disclosed by the WPCA, it's doubtful anyone would vote in favor. In fact, this is why the WPCA itself said it could not recommend sewers. But if the WPCA separates sewers from the plant into two phases, in other words, first get homeowners to say that they are in favor of sewers based on theoretical and biased questions based on just sewer costs, well, that will add 1,100 new customers, which will almost double their existing residential customer base. Then, in phase two, after homeowners are assessed for sewers, they could then seek approval for the plant, and there will be followed by an additional tax assessed for the plant. If indeed this is their plan, who would benefit from it? Well, the WPCA would almost double its revenues by adding 1,100 new Peninsula sewer customers. That's something that most companies can only dream of. And they can also get the sewage treatment plant that they need to support further development. Commercial and residential developers, as well as commercial real estate landlords, can also profit from building multifamily housing, commercial buildings, and leasing out properties that currently can't be leased. We want to be clear, none of this is illegal or even wrong. We do not begrudge any local developers or businessmen for making money, and we support development, so long as it is reasonable and managed so as not to destroy our community. We are not and do not want to be Danbury. We are a small town. We know that may have to change somewhat, but we would like to keep that small town feeling as much as possible. Our main reason for raising these facts is to point out that there are significant financial interests behind the WPCA's push for sewers that have nothing to do with the lake. As is often the case when a government entity is pushing for something that doesn't seem to make sense, if you follow the money, you'll find out the real reason. To be sure, there are parties who will benefit from sewers, but it will be at the expense of homeowners who would wind up paying anywhere from $85,000 to $250,000 for those benefits. How and when did this project start? Well, in January 2018, the town sanitarian sent a letter to the WPCA saying that in his opinion, septics were a problem and he recommended that the WPCA build sewers. That letter cited no studies, no data, no evidence or any record, just his opinion. In December 2018, the WPCA hired a consultant with instructions to find evidence that septics were polluting the lake. In 2021-2022, the consultant tried to do what the WPCA wanted. They produced several lengthy and technical reports, which the WPCA claimed showed that septics were polluting the lake. In September 2022, Candlewood Shores Tax District commissioned a sewer committee to examine all consultant reports and WPCA documents and to investigate the claims made by the WPCA. The mission of the committee was to confirm the facts, and if the WPCA claims proved to be true, the committee was prepared to recommend to the community that sewers be approved. The committee was made up of homeowners, all who live on or near the lake and who have a real and significant interest in the lake's health. The committee worked with environmental engineers and other experts, interviewed other town officials, and looked at 2 case studies of other lakes that built sewers. Their report was released in April 2023 and can be viewed on YouTube. The findings of that study were that septics have less than a 0.1% impact on the phosphorus level in the lake, and building sewers would have virtually zero impact on the lake. In June 2023, the WPCA's consultant reviewed these findings and did not refute them. And in September 2023, the engineers acknowledged that the lake was in fact in decent condition and there was no environmental need for sewers. This is consistent with what the officials at the other 4 towns we spoke to said. If the WPCA had been concerned with Candlewood Lake's water quality, why didn't they try coordinating with the other towns on the lake? The US EPA clearly states that all towns that border a lake must be involved and coordinate in order to address lake issues. And this makes obvious sense, especially given that in this case, Brookfield has less than 10% of the lake frontage. And anything that it might do, like building sewers, would have no effect unless all of the other towns also did the same thing. Had the WPCA really been concerned with the lake, it would have hired lake environmental experts, not sewer engineers and consultants, and it would have tried coordinating with the other 4 towns on the lake. But to our knowledge, it never even contacted them. We did, however, and no official from any of the towns had any plans about sewers or were even considering them. Instead, they raised other issues of concern, such as controlling stormwater runoff. So why did the WPCA make claims about Candlewood Lake? The reality is the WPCA runs a sewer business. It has no knowledge, expertise, or experience in lake environmental matters. The claims about septics polluting the lake were unfounded, and although the WPCA has now stopped making such claims now that that has been proven, they initially made those claims because their ability to convince homeowners to approve sewers depended on getting significant government grants to lower the cost of sewers. And the only way to get government Clean Water Act grants was to claim that Candlewood Lake was being polluted. Why did we produce this video? Well, how you answer this survey can have a major financial impact costing tens of thousands of dollars. This is a significant financial decision. Remember, the sewer tax is a mortgage on your home. It incurs 18% interest if unpaid after 30 days, and the WPCA has the legal right to foreclose on your home if unpaid. We urge each homeowner to weigh all of the information and then respond as they see fit. Because of that, we felt that we should share all of our research and findings with all homeowners so that they could also be able to make an informed decision. We thank you for listening and for your patience, and please respond to the survey as you think appropriate.